Excellent. And here we get going. We do ask that you keep your camera off as well. That helps with our bandwidth, as well as visual distractions in the background for those of us watching the presentation. And during the presentation, feel free to type questions you may have into our chat box. That can be found in the menu of your Zoom screen, and we will try to get to all of our questions at the end of the presentation. We do stop right at 8 o'clock, so if we don't get to your question, feel free to send those in to us, and we will do our best to get answers for you. After the webinar, we will send you a follow-up email asking you how we did. If you could fill out that survey, that'd be great. We really appreciate the feedback, looking for what we can do better next time. Also gives you an opportunity to let us know what you want to hear for future webinars. Quick little story about who we are here at New Hampshire Lakes for those of you who have not tuned into a webinar before. We're the only publicly supported nonprofit organization working for New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. You can become a supporter today at nhlakes.org, and right now we have a special opportunity where your donations will be doubled. So if you wanted to give, now's the time to do it. That expires on the 15th, so we are running out of time for that special opportunity. Our mission is to restore and preserve the health of all of New Hampshire's lakes, and we do that through our 3 program areas. Our advocacy program, which is getting into full swing right now. I know we have a couple here on staff who are very busy with the legislative session starting up. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up for our newsletters to hear more about how you can get involved. Our conservation programs, we have our Lake Host program, keeping invasive species out of our lakes, and our Lake Smart program, helping homeowners do everything they can on their own properties to protect our lakes. We also have an outreach program, which brings you our webinar this evening. So thank you for tuning in. Our hosts this evening are myself, Erin Mastine. I'm the outreach manager, and we're joined by Kat Kelleher, our conservation program coordinator, as well as Gloria Norcross, our other conservation program coordinator. Thank you for helping out tonight. And our expert presenter is Susie Spikol. I will now turn it over to you so we can get to all those cute otters.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to share my screen and get started on otters. It's so exciting to see so many people showing up for otters. You guys can see that okay, Erin?
Oh, what happened here?
Oh, no. Try it again. All right. Here we go.
Perfect.
You see that? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I am Susie Spikol from the Harris Center, and I'm here tonight to share with you my undying love for otters. I'm so grateful for New Hampshire Lakes for asking me to talk about one of my most favorite mammals, and probably a mammal that makes the top 10 cutest animal list every time. Not always the river otter that makes the list, it's often the sea otter, but we're really going to focus in on the river otter since that's what we have here in New Hampshire. Before I talk about otters, I'd like to tell you where I work and a little bit about the organization I work for. The Harris Center for Conservation Education is located in Hancock, New Hampshire, and we are a small land trust, a nonprofit that works hard to do a couple of things, and I'm going to tell you what they are. First, we do tons of programming in the public schools, and all the way from preschool up through high school in the Monadnock region. Since we're located in Hancock, we are geographically oriented towards the Monadnock region. So all of our work, from education to land protection to conservation research, is in that region. We're real specialists, and we work with over 5,000 students every year, and they do all sorts of things, but they're always connected to the next generation science standards. A big part of what I do at the Harris Center is I'm the community programs director there. I offer and develop programs out into the community, and they're really programs that are designed to help people fall in love with this place that we call home. And they start from the very youngest. This is me with my babies in backpacks and toddlers in tow program. And we have programs that go the whole lifespan, all the way up to people in life care facilities and assisted living and hospice programs. We always believe there's always a place in your life for falling in love with the natural world and feeling inspired by it. all of our work is done within our sanctuary that the Harris Center has worked over 50 years in protecting. We have over 25,000 acres of land protected through the Harris Center and other conservation organizations that we work with, and towns and municipalities as well. And if you haven't been down to the Monadnock region of New Hampshire, I hope you come down and visit us. It's really beautiful, and so much of that beauty has to do with the land protection the Harris Center has been working on. And this is a gorgeous picture of Lake Newbanooset, which I'm sure New Hampshire Lakes is very fond of, since I think it's one of the clearest lakes in the state. Right, Erin? Is that true? I think it is. She's not sure. I think it is. That's what I've heard. We have a new program that we've been working on for the past since 10 years ago, and that is conservation research. And our research is designed to figure out what's going on in the land we're protecting. And it's all the way from seeing what animals through trail cam projects, and offering programs for people to connect to conservation research. This is our raptor observation station up on Pack Monadnock on Miller State Park, one of New Hampshire state parks, where we have a hawk counter set up there from the end of August to the middle of November, counting every single migrating raptor. We do lots of public programs. It's a great place to come check out in September and October and a little bit in November. We like to say it's the greatest show above Earth, and all of the data that we collect is going towards science and research. So really, the Harris Center is all about helping people connect to the natural world, and the idea of really kind of hoping that we have the next future generations who are also interested and connected to the natural world. So that's a little bit about the Harris Center. Sorry for the short commercial, but that's what they tell me I have to do when I do presentations. So now on to the animal of the evening, otters. And they are so charismatic. They are so amazing. And tonight we're going to find out how they're adapted for their semi-aquatic life. And I'm going to start off by telling you that my first experience with otters were with these guys. Some of you might recognize it. This is Emmett Otter's Jug Band, who premiered in the Muppet Show's Christmas special. And I was a little kid at the time and saw these creatures. I didn't even know what an otter was, because this is where I grew up. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and Brooklyn, New York is not, this is actually around the corner from my home. And this was just taken last year when I was visiting. It hasn't changed much. It was an otter habitat. So everything that I thought about otters came starting with Emmett Otter, and then this book, which some of you might also recall. This is Wind in the Willows by the Scottish author Kenneth Grahame. And in it, there's a character whose name is Portly Otter. And he doesn't appear very much in the book. He's just in a few chapters, but I was really taken by him. He was very friendly and very kind, and everybody wanted to be his friend. And I loved it. And the pictures in the book, the copy that I had, just made it even more endearing. So that was my first otter from fiction that I fell in love with. And then there was this book in my life. Some of you might recognize this fellow. This is Gavin Maxwell, another Scottish writer. He was a naturalist, and he lived with otters, and he wrote an incredible book called Ring of Bright Water, which I read so many times and had read to me so many times that the pages fell out, and I'm on my third copy of this book in my lifetime. It is just filled with his life with Midge. That's Midge right there, his pet otter. Of course, this is in the 1950s and 60s where he was writing. Now you really can't keep pet otters, but the book is just filled with charming stories, incredible sketches, photographs, and I really begged my parents for a pet otter. And they wouldn't get me a pet otter, but they took me to see the movie. This is a movie that was made in 1969. I saw it in the 70s in Brooklyn College. And even though I had read the book and had the book read to me, and I knew the ending is quite sad, when I watched it on the film, I cried so hard they had to take me out of the movie theater. And I want to give you all a warning. If you go out and try and find this movie and read it, you too will probably cry. So that's just a warning. It's very sad. And that was the era where all animal movies ended with you having to cry. But it is a beautiful memoir, and I encourage everybody to pick it up and read it. It's probably a little dated. I haven't read it in a while, but check it out. Um, so let's talk about who really are the otters. Now that we've learned that all my experience was through fiction and puppets and a memoir, I have spent the last 30 plus years working for the Harris Center and becoming a naturalist. And although I'm not a scientist, I am what I like to say a storyteller of the natural world. I make it my job to kind of get really deep into the animals, spend a lot of time outside, know everything that I can. Tonight, here's just a little bit of everything I know about otters. First of all, otters belong to the mustelid group of animals. And here are all of the mustelids. These are Maine's mustelids, but they're the same mustelids that we have here in New Hampshire. So in size order, from the smallest mustelids to the biggest, the weasel family is another way that we call it. We have the long-tailed weasel and the short-tailed weasel. Some of you might know those animals by the name of ermine or stoats. And they also, some of you might think they turn white in the winter, and that would be true. And ermine is just another name for a weasel. And the weasels that we have here in New Hampshire typically do turn white. Okay, going up in size is the mink. That's the next biggest one. Chocolatey brown with a white chin patch, also semi-aquatic. We're going to talk a tiny bit about the mink later this evening. And then the American marten. Now, the American marten in my neck of the woods where I live in the Monadnock region hasn't been seen in many years, decades, centuries. But if you live north of the Whites, you might have American martens around, and I encourage you this winter to go out and look for them. They are also sometimes called a pine marten, and they are arboreal tree climbers. And the same with the fisher. Notice I'm not saying fisher cat, I'm saying fisher because the fisher does not belong to the cat family. The fisher belongs in the weasel family. And I have a whole nother slideshow, whole nother talk on fishers and the myths behind them. So maybe I'll get invited back and can talk about the fishers, although they don't spend that much time in the lakes. But the fisher is the second largest of the weasels. But the biggest member of the weasel family is the river otter. And a lot of people are surprised by that. They often think it's the fisher, and it might be the fisher's reputation that makes it seem larger than life. But it's actually the river otter. And river otters can weigh up to, the male river otter can weigh up to about 30 pounds. And it's quite big when you see it out of water. It's got that really big tail. So now that you know who the river otters family is, I want to tell you about somebody who got kicked out of the weasel family recently. So for a really long time, the skunk was considered part of the mustelids. And it wasn't until some recent DNA testing and analysis that they figured out that even though the skunks share some similar physical attributes, it's actually not a member of the weasel family. It's in its very own group now called Mephididae, and it's in there with the stink badger. And I like to say that those are probably too well suited for each other. But one of the reasons that people thought that skunks were in the weasel family was the musk, that the spray that the skunk makes is also something that every member of the weasel family can produce. They don't spray it as much, but they have a musk gland and they use it a lot in scenting, and it has a similar musky odor. So that was one of the reasons that they kind of clumped them together. And plus it has some similar body shapes. So let's talk about what makes you a member of the weasel family. What makes you a mustelid? And what it has to do is this incredible body structure. You might notice that all of the members that we talked about have this very long body and these short legs. They don't have any additional vertebrae. They have about the same as most mammals, which is somewhere in the 20s. I can't remember the exact number. It's just that their vertebrae are extended, a little extra long, and it just gives them this very long body. And what I've read and how they got that way is it was evolutionarily they developed or evolved to be pursuing rodent-like creatures in burrows underground. And to be able to kind of pursue those animals, they had to have a body structure that could fit in the tunnels. And that's how they evolved into this, having this very long body and these relatively short legs. Some of you might think that they look somewhat like a dachshund. And that's true because dachshunds were kind of artificially selected to pursue members of the weasel family. So through selective breeding, they bred these dogs to have a similar shape so they could get down into the same burrows and chase stoats. And that's when we see pictures of King Henry VIII, and he's wearing that white cape around his neck, and it's made out of ermines. That's all from being hunted by dogs that could get down into the stoat tunnels. That was a sidetrack. Now, here is that musk that I was talking about. They do produce out of an anal gland near their anus a musky jello or gelatinous kind of blob that they'll scent mark their territory. And you can see this. Your dogs, if you have dogs and you walk them along New Hampshire's lakes, your dogs might find this and find it extra special to roll in. If they come back smelling extra stinky like fish, they might have found this musk marking. And for otters, the musk marking and their scat marking, called spraint or sprainting, is very important to them. We're going to talk about that when we get on with their reproduction system and their territories. So, but this is what it kind of looks like, and you can find it. This is a really good time of the year right now to go out and look around for it along the edges of any freshwater system that you're living near. And even if you live on the coast, we have river otters that can live in the estuaries and those coastal rivers. So check it out. And if you find some and you're not sure, you can send me a picture at the Harris Center. I'm happy to help you identify it. All right, so we have river otters, but they're not the only otters that exist in the world. There are about 13 different types of species of river otters in the world, and here's just a few of them. And we have river otters here, and you might have heard the sea otters. And I'm just going to focus in on kind of two charismatic ones. We'll just spend a little moment talking about the sea otter, who does make the top of the list of the cutest animals in the world pretty consistently. So the sea otters are out on the Pacific coast. There's a lot from in California, kind of in the bay up to Point Conception. And there's about, I think the last I read was they think there's about 3,000 of them, more or less. And they live in those kelp forests, and they don't eat the kelp. They're carnivores. All members of the weasel family are part of the carnivora group. So they're all meat eaters. So they're not eating the kelp, but many of you might know that they use the kelp to tie around their bodies to kind of anchor themselves so they don't float away and they can rest. And they are eating urchins and abalone and clams and things like that. And they are a mammal with the densest fur of any mammal on Earth. So they have to. They spend most of their life in the water. They are completely aquatic, these guys. The other otter that I find really interesting is this. This is the giant river otter. You would find this in South America, in the Amazon, the Playa, the Orinoco rivers. These are called the wolf of the river or the river wolf. They are really big. They have this really lush, velvety fur. And you can see from this picture, they have some creamy coloration kind of down on their chin and on their chest. And scientists think that each giant river otter has their own special coloration, and you can actually identify individuals. And they live really communally, and they hunt communally. And I just was reading up on them because I'm obsessed with any type of otter. And I read some accounts that they've seen them actually hunt down jaguars and alligators and crocodiles. So pretty interesting. If you are really getting into otters after this talk, I highly recommend everybody listen to Allie Ward's podcast called Ologies. And she has a whole hour plus episode on lutrology, which is an actual scientists who study otters. And that the one that I listened to was primarily on sea otters, which is really interesting because although they're very cute, they are actually not that they're not cute in personality. I'll leave it at that and encourage you to take a listen. Let's just take a one little sidetrack on another semi-aquatic weasel, member of the weasel family that lives right here in New Hampshire, because some of you might think that you're seeing a river otter when in fact you might actually be seeing a American mink. And here's a picture of the American mink. The American mink is chocolatey brown with a white chin patch, and it is much smaller than the river otter. So if you remember, the river otter, the male river otter can weigh up to about 25 to 30 pounds. The mink, the male mink can weigh up to like 2.5 pounds. So just think about that size difference. But they live in similar areas and they eat similar foods and they have some similar behavior. And this is a great animal to keep your eye open for along the rivers and wetlands that you might be going. If you're finding some tracks, and tonight at the end, we're going to look at different tracks of otters, and you think you find an otter track, but it's much too small, you've probably found a mink track. And again, if you ever find something and you're not sure what it is, send me a picture at the Harris Center. I'm happy to help identify it. You should see how many scat photographs I get a week in my inbox from people. Anyway, on to the otter of the night. Here we go. Tonight, we're going to talk about what makes a river otter so well adapted to its semi-aquatic life. It does live a life of foraging. It's a carnivore, so it's always in the water. It can come out on land and it can travel quite a bit on land, so it doesn't have to stay in the water. That's why it's semi-aquatic as opposed to the sea otter, which is all aquatic. So I'm never good with remembering numbers. So I put this up because people always want to know, well, how big is its territory? And here it is, the typically 3 to 10 square miles. And as you can see, the male otter will have a much larger territory. It will overlap several females, and that's so that he has access and opportunity to mate with more than just one. The female territories are very well defined by scat and scent marking, and the females kind of defend them. And the males travel a big loop. They're always going around and checking their territory. So are the females. And in fact, you can get on what I like to call otter time. Otter time is if you live near a wetland area and you've seen an otter, check back every 7 to 10 days because they are pretty much animals of a rhythm where they are checking their territory over and over, and you can actually catch on to their kind of rhythm, and you might be able to see them if you're there every 7 to 10 days. So good luck with that. I've had that happen before in the past when I lived near a different water body than I live now, and I would see regular otters visiting every 7 to 10 days. It was very cool. So they are eaters of mostly fish, but they have a pretty bad reputation for eating all the fish, and that is not true. They eat a wide variety of food, including crayfish and snakes and reptiles, turtles, amphibians. They eat little birds. They do eat fish. They eat mussels. And they are considered to be a great indicator species of water quality. So if you have otters in your area, it means that you have really good water around. And that's really important, especially for those of you interested in New Hampshire's lakes. And New Hampshire's otter population is pretty great. It's doing really well. It's thriving. And that has so much to do with our ability to watch over our lakes and maintain the quality of our water system. So river otters have a couple of different ways of fishing for their food, especially when it comes to fish. They have, they're kind of like ambush hunters. They don't want to use up a lot of their energy chasing fish. So they kind of do what is known as patch fishing. And they are real predators of the slow moving fish. So think of perch, think of the fish down kind of in the shallows of the water. That's going to be what they're going to be hunting primarily. And they kind of swim down and look and approach, and they have some special adaptations to help them. I'll be talking about that in just a moment. But sometimes they are also going to go after schools of fish or groups of fish or faster moving fish. And when they do, it's called swim fishing, where they come up and they dive down and come up and dive down, and they're in hot pursuit. But I have to tell you, like many predators, they are not very successful. The statistics I read is that for every 10 times they go down to catch a fish, they only come up 3 times with a fish. And that's pretty standard for lots of predators, but doesn't stop them from trying. And while they're down there, they're going to be eating anything else they can find that might catch their attention, like a dragonfly nymph or a crayfish or anything like that. Most of the scat that I find in my neighborhood has a lot of crayfish shell in them. So think of like slow moving waters is where they're going to be living. So let's talk about the adaptations that they have. Here's a really great picture of a river otter underwater. And you can't really see it, but over the eyes of the river otter, like many mammals that go in the water, they have a nictitating membrane, kind of a lens that comes down and protects their eyes like goggles. They also have the ability to block up their ears. So they have a little valve in their ears as soon as they submerge, and that helps them from getting swimmer's ear and getting muck in their ears. So their ears kind of seal up, and so do their noses. And you might have seen it in the last picture, but if you it's a little hard to see in this one, and in the future ones they have webbed feet. And that webbed foot, the hind foot in particular, is really what they're paddling with. And then take a look at that big fat tail. That's the tail that is really going to be driving them. It's steering them, it's undulating. I've heard descriptions of otters swimming underwater as described as rubbery undulations. They kind of swim back and forth, and they're really using the tail. They're very sleek, and their body is similarly designed to something like a seal, where they're narrow at the front and then wider in the back. And it's those back hips and tail that are really propelling them. When they swim, they tuck their front paws down to the side, and they kind of just undulate with their back. And that really makes them incredible swimmers. They can stay underwater for 4 to 6 minutes, and they have some adaptations that help them do that too. They can kind of shunt the blood away from their extremities. Once they're diving, the blood moves out of their extremities and goes to keep the inner core, their vital organs, oxygenated. And they're pretty fast swimmers. They're faster than Michael Phelps. I think Michael Phelps can swim, what was it, like 3 miles an hour, 2 miles an hour? River otters can swim 6 miles an hour. So if they were competing against Michael Phelps, they would have won the gold medal. Here's a great picture where you can really see those feet, those webbed feet. Also, this is a good picture of the underbelly of the river otter, which is like this creamier color. And that's not uncommon for mammals or that are predators, or actually many animals that live in the water. They'll be dark on top and light underneath, and that gives them some camouflage capacity, so that when the sun is shining down, they just kind of look like part of the water. Think about a killer whale. Think about a penguin, and now you can think about a river otter in the same kind of thought process. It's a really good camouflage. And the most, I think, amazing part of the river otter is its fur. And I wish we were all in person, because when I do this talk in person, we have a otter pelt at the Harris Center, and you can feel it. And if you could touch it, what you would feel is the top layer of the fur has these long guard hairs. But if you rub your fingers down into the fur, you would find their underfur. And their underfur is this kind of wavy, very dense and buttery fur. And that fur is their insulating fur. So the guard hairs are kind of the waterproofing part, and the under fur is the insulating fur. And these two pictures show that otters have to spend a lot of time rolling to tend to their fur. The rolling dries their fur out and it fluffs it up. They also spend a lot of time grooming their fur and cleaning it. If their fur is not in good condition, they will not survive. And sadly, when they first tried to keep river otters um, alive at zoos, they died. They died of pneumonia, and that's because they didn't provide them with good rolling spots. And what makes a good rolling spot for a river otter? Grasses, sand, snow, anything that kind of has some kind of edginess to it, so it kind of gets in there and can fluff up their fur. I kind of think it looks pretty fun. Sometimes I've thought, I think I'll roll like an otter. And they do a lot of grooming, and they also do some communal grooming. So they'll groom each other and they'll clean each other. And they do this so much enough that researchers and scientists think that it isn't just to do with keeping their fur in good condition. It has a lot to do with social bonding and connecting. And here's a picture of an adult with a young, and that's what we're going to talk about kind of next. Oh, here we go. Here's my numbers. See, I told you I'm never good with numbers. They can swim up to 8 miles per hour and can dive down 60 feet, which is really remarkable. This is a really great picture of seeing how they're swimming with their legs tucked in and making that very tubular shape that's going to slice through the water. So, of course, one of my favorite parts when I learn about a mammal is how do they court and how do they reproduce? I think those are really interesting stories. And so the river otter the female begins to come into a receptive time for mating in the winter. And she will alert the male in her territory or the males in her territory by leaving scent markings and scat that have the signature odor that draws the male to her. And he will find her. And if she is receptive, they will spend some time courting, and they'll court by nuzzling, by chasing, by hunting together, and they'll spend several days or more together, kind of going around and caring one another and playing and sleeping near each other, things like that. And this is in the wintertime. And brings up a good point, is that these mammals, these semi-aquatic mammals, are active all winter long, which is really remarkable when you think about it. They are swimming in the water under the ice, getting their food. And the place that they like to do this the best, according to the researchers, is in beaver dams and beaver lodges, kind of the beaver area, not so much in the lodges, sorry, the dams. So the dammed up area is a great fishing hole for them. And the beavers maintain these open spots in their area, and the otters will use that. And they'll swim under the ice, and there's oftentimes an air pocket between the ice and the top of the water. And so otters can go quite a long distance under the ice and kind of be between the ice and the water. And there's also been research to show a couple of amazing things. One is that they'll sometimes den up with beavers in the wintertime. So they'll go into a beaver lodge and they'll just be a guest there for a night or two. They're not interested in eating the beaver. They're interested in the warmth that the beaver lodge can provide for them, which I just think is really interesting. But they're not that great guests, because another thing that they like to do, according to research and what people have seen, is they'll break the dam. So they come and stay in your house, they take up your bedroom, and then they leave and they kind of wreck your area. But for them, breaking the dam is a really amazing opportunity for the otter, because there's a lot of fish that are kind of suck down the force of the water when the dam is broken, and the otter will be right there to catch them. And then it often lowers the water level of the beaver pond. So by the time the beavers repair the dam, the water level underneath has gone down significantly enough that the otters can really go for quite long distances between that ice and water layer. So interesting. And something that many of you probably have read about and heard about, maybe some of you have even seen, is the ability of the otter to slide. And it even has a special name called tobogganing. And this is a good picture of it. And it gives you a look at this otter. It's going to slide down the hill the same way that it swims. So it's using the same body characteristics. It's tucking its paws in, it's very streamlined, and it's going to kick with those hind feet and kind of push itself down and then move its tail to steer it. And some of you, and if you're lucky, might have found some marks in the snow where they left their belly slides. And a big question that people always wonder and have pondered for a long time is, do otters slide just for fun? We're kind of fascinated by this question as humans, because for us, when we think of an animal doing something for fun, and not for anything other than just for the sheer joy of it, we consider that a sign of intelligence. I'm just going to say up front, I believe that all animals have intelligence. I believe all animals have a consciousness too. And so I don't know, they just recently found out that spiders have dreams and even nightmares, and that crows can recognize individual people for generations, especially if those people have not treated them well. So the fact that do otters slide just for fun? Well, some scientists were curious about this, and they did a study out of Frostburg State University in Maryland. And what they discovered is, yes, they used trail cameras and video trapping, and they found out that this is how they described it as fun. The otters would go up a hill, slide down it, go back up the hill, slide back down it, go back up the hill, slide back down it. So it wasn't from locomoting. It wasn't from going like from point A to point B. It wasn't for any food resource. It wasn't for any territory resource, kind of territory marking that they could think of. It seemed like what they interpreted is just for fun. So I've tracked a lot in my life. I love tracking. I love the winter for that. I have yet to find an otter slide with otter footprints that go up a hill and down a hill and up a hill and down a hill again and again, but maybe this will be the winter where I find the otters playing. I'm still hopeful. So I got sidetracked, back to their mating time. So after a lot of this courtship time, and by the way, the females are receptive to mate by the age of 2, but it takes the males a little bit longer. And the older the male, the stronger the male, the more mating opportunity he will have. So the kind of older otters are going to be protecting their territories that are overlapping with the females, and they're going to be mating, and the younger ones are going to have to wait for an opportunity. And once they do mate, it is a long affair. They actually mate for 75 to 90 minutes, which is a long time. And the male will climb on top of the female. He typically bites the back of her neck, and scientists and researchers have recorded caterwauling coming from the female. She seems to caterwaul during this, and they'll take some breaks and then resume. And then once the female's had enough, she kind of chases the male off. And then the female is the sole raiser of the young. The male does not participate. He goes off on his way to mate with as many other females as he can and pass on his genes. And the female is going to raise the young. But it's a really interesting story about the young. So the females, the mating season happens kind of in late winter, but the egg does not implant in the female until the following winter. So she basically has a fertilized egg inside of her that is in suspended animation. This is called delayed implantation, and otters are not the only mammals that do this. Bears do this. This is a common strategy, and part of the strategy is to make sure that the female has enough body fat to be able to get kind of have the babies without suffering on her own, without her dying. So there's kind of a waiting period. And once she comes back around to like the early winter of the following year, if her body has enough body fat and body mass, the egg will implant, and then it's a very short gestational period before the young are born. And baby otters are called kits or pups. It depends on who you talk to. There's typically 2 to 6 that are born, but most often about 2 to 3. And the female finds dens in her territory. And I say dens because it's more than one den. She move her young throughout the time that they're nursing. They come out pretty much needing a lot of help at the very beginning, but they quickly become independent and are able to swim by 5 months. But they don't leave the female. They stay with the female. The siblings stay with the female for almost a whole nother year. They'll spend the winter, they'll spend the spring, the summer, the fall, the winter, and then she will stop nursing, about 5 months, and they're pretty much independent, though she does feed them. They do a lot of playing during that time, a lot of figuring out hunting. They figure out kind of bonding. They figure out how to care for themselves, all those types of things. And then once she's finished raising them, kind of gotten back to that late winter again, she'll be ready to mate again. So female otters spend most of their life either almost pregnant, nursing, raising young, and then almost pregnant again. So this is the life of the female otter. But she does have pretty cute babies, I gotta say. And here they are, and they are very vocal, otters, when they're with each other. There's a lot of chittering and chattering, whistles, buzzy calls, groans, purrs, lots of ways of describing the different sounds. And there's a lot of interaction between them, where they're really figuring out kind of dominance and behavior. And when they do disperse, the males, and this is very typical again for mammals, the male otters will disperse further than the females. And there's even evidence and records and sightings of the female, one female pup staying with the mom to help raise the next batch. Not always, but that has been seen. Oh gosh, sorry. All right, I'm going to see if we can hear this. So let me see if I can get this. All right, so Erin, just give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear this. This is just some vocalizations and some behavior that we're going to talk about. Here, what is going on? That is just a lot of chirping and purring. That kind of buzzy sound that you heard is described as purring. And what they're doing, oh, I wish I could get rid of this thing on the bottom. Let me go back and hold on. Oh, well, okay. Let me just try this again. All right, I'm just gonna tell you what we just saw is a trail cam, which is if you have a trail cam, you live near a water system and you find some otter scat, put it up because otters have a latrine where they go to the bathroom, especially in these family groups, they'll mark the same area. And that's what we're seeing. It's an otter latrine. And otter scat has a special name called spraint. And people say that it smells really fishy. Some people, I've seen it, I've smelt it, is very bad smelling, but it's really cool. And where you find one, you'll find a whole bunch, and you'll find that kind of gelatinous scent marking as well. When you were watching that, you might have noticed, and some of you might see this if you follow any trail cams on Facebook, but they do a little dance, and they're kind of patting down and they're defecating and they're scent marking, but the pads of their feet also have scent glands in them. So they're scenting where they're defecating, they're scenting where the musk is coming out, but then their feet are also scenting it and marking it. And that's why they do that little bit of dance. And they are really, really excited about it. And they'll do it over and over. And it's really fun if you have a video camera to watch. What's going on? I can't seem to advance. Okay, hold on. I don't know what's going on. You guys, I can't get my thing to go ahead. Okay, hold on. Why'd you try this? Yay, we figured it out. All right, so that hopefully inspires some of you to ask for trail cams for Christmas and the holidays. And if not, and you already have one, put it up, check it out. And all you need to do is find a spot where you've already found some otter sign. So I want to go over what otter sign looks like. And we are getting to the perfect season for tracking. So here's their footprints. There are 5 toes on each foot. I like to describe them as little teardrops. You can see the webbing on their feet often. This is a pretty common pattern that you'll see where it's kind of their 2 back feet and their front foot kind of in a 3. But the most common pattern that you might see, and this gives you the scale, the size, and there's lots of great information on the internet and in field guides if you want to figure out more about the size. But this is the pattern that we often see most. I'm going to just put my thing is this is the bounding pattern where it's 2 together. So it's their front feet and their back feet. Then their front feet are flying out, landing in the next spot. And as their back feet are coming down to land, their front feet are going again. And you can see they can really, and tail's going to drag up the middle, and they can really go quite a distance. So on land, these animals can move really fast. So here's just some sign for you to keep your eyes open for. These are the slides that you can notice on lakes and rivers near you in the wintertime, on downhill sections of hills. So keep your eyes open for the belly slides. And this is their scat. And you can see their scat in this one particular scat. It's very crumbly looking, and that's because it's got a lot of fish scales, a lot of exoskeletons, and a lot of crayfish. And this is just more of it. And when you find it, you do find tons of it. And it looks all crumbly and you might walk past it. But now that you know what it looks like, I hope many of you will take a look. So I want to make sure that I had time for some questions. That's what I have to say about river otters. I hope you've all really enjoyed it. And I'm hoping I can answer some of the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Erin, what's questions we got going?
All right. Well, I don't see any in the chat box just yet, so we'll give people to a minute to see if they want to type something in there.
Sure.
But I had a question, and I hope this isn't silly. When you were talking about the otters having that membrane that come down over their eye,
Yeah.
and their ears and their nose closing, is that something they have to consciously do, or does that happen subconsciously?
Oh, it's such a great question. No, it just happens subconsciously. It's just as soon as they begin to submerge, those things kind of happen where their nose is kind of valves close up and their ears tuck down, things like that. So that's really pretty cool. And the same with their blood. I mean, the blood is just moving from the extremities to the core.
Yeah, I figured, but okay, so now we do have lots of questions flooding in. So let's
Great.
see what I can get here. And then Kat if you want to jump in just to make sure I'm not missing anything, that would be great. Let's see here. Jenny's asking if you'd seen a YouTube channel about Kotsumet.
Oh, is that
The otters are pets.
yeah, I don't, it's hard for me to watch those because I just feel really strongly that river otters and all otters, I think they should be in the wild.
Yeah.
So when they have them as pets, I'm like, oh, it's so cute. And of course, I wanted one when I was a kid as a pet, but now I'm like, they shouldn't be people's pets. And plus, would you really want an animal that loves to defecate and dance over its defecation and scent mark in your home? And then maybe they descent them, which is probably true. But I know it is really cute. I mean, I admittedly have watched a few of them, but then I was like, I have to stop.
Okay, Michelle is asking if they poop on rocks at the water's edge or others places.
Yes, that is exactly good places to look. So you really, to find their scat, and you could all do this tomorrow, go out and walk or near any wetland and look. They're going to be defecating and leaving their scent kind of along the very edge, and they're going to be they can be on rocks. I've seen it on rocks. I've seen it on moss. I've seen it on top of pine needles and leaves, but it's close to the edge. And a lot of times it seems to me that they're looking for an area that has a little bit of brushiness to it. And that might be for kind of not being just so out in the open. So it's not going to be, well, I have seen it in lots of places, but I've noticed the majority of when I'm finding it is sort of in areas where there's some scrubby growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we actually have four in a row, people asking if they have any predators.
Oh, yes, that's a great question. I forgot to mention that. Once they become an adult, no. But when they are just a young little otter, yes. Then when they're babies, when they're just coming out and learning, they are susceptible to being eaten by aerial predators. So, eagles, red-tailed hawks, owls, things like that. And then also bobcats, coyotes, the main ones. And sadly, this isn't a predator, but a large part of what kills them is roadkill. So they are traveling between, their territory is water, and if there's streams and rivers that go under highways and things like that, and they can't get through it if the culvert's not big enough, or for whatever reason they're going to cross over the highways bisecting. So we have a couple of mounted specimens at the Harris Center, and those all came from roadkill. But once they become fully adult, they're pretty big, and they're not going to be taken by many things. They can be attacked by dogs, but they'll also give it right back to the dogs. So I'm sure there's occasional times where a dog might kill one. But that's a good question. And that just brings up, otters are diurnal when there are not a lot of people in their areas. So if you were looking at otters, maybe up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, you might see them sort of daytime. In my area, the most of the time I see them is crepuscular, dawn and dusk, and nighttime. But a great time to see them during the day anywhere is when the ice is receding after, like March, and we're at our lakes and rivers and we get the shelf of ice. They'll come up and they'll feed on the shelf of ice, and you'll watch them kind of call up a fish, eat it on the ice, go back down, get something else to eat. So bring your binoculars with you whenever you're driving around in March and the ice is receding, and you might see an otter. It's really fun.
Okay, Paul and Barbara are saying that they find empty clamshells on the shallow water of their lake. Is this from otters feeding on clams? And if so, how do they open the clamshells?
Yeah, good question. Yes, otters do eat clams, and they can use their fingers. They're really good. So if there's a little bit of an opening, they're going to be able to, they're dexterous, you know what I'm saying? They're agile with their fingers, so they can pull it apart. But a lot of times when we see piles of mussel shells, especially when they're piled up, that's the work of a raccoon more than a river otter. So raccoons will also eat mussels or freshwater mussels, and they'll they are really good with their fingers. So they're just going to pry it apart. And that's why you don't often see it crushed or cracked that often. They're kind of pulling it apart. Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay. Nancy is asking, how long do they live?
I forget that. I would say this is somebody will have to fact check me on this because like I said, I'm terrible with numbers. I get like the whole story and I love that. But then when I have to remember like the details of how much land they have or live on or, that stuff. But I think 10 years is like pretty good for an otter. I don't think they live that much longer in the wild after. And again, a really important thing to remember is that when we have otters in our community, it's a really good sign that we have a healthy water system. And like I said earlier, New Hampshire's otter population is doing really well. And otters are even making a comeback in Long Island. We had a special speaker last year, Mike Bottini. He's a wildlife conservation biologist for the state of New York, and his project is an otter program out on Long Island. So otters are coming back to cities, and if you really want some interesting otter fun, check out the Otters of Singapore, where the otters have made a return. It's a different species of otter, and they actually have like crossing guards. So Singapore, the main city, is really busy, but they live in the main city, and they have people who go out and help cross the otters over. So check
Cool.
that out. It's really cool.
Jacqueline's asking if individual females have unique scents.
Wow, what a great question. Well, I don't know for certain, but what I do know is that from the kind of research that they're doing into scat and DNA analysis of scat, that they're able to find out like individual markers on the scat that can kind of that tell you that which individual it is and who they're related to. And so I'd imagine that their scents are specific, like a fingerprint to us might be their scent. But I don't know for sure. But I'd be interested in figuring in how I could participate in that research because I think that's really a great question. And if there's anybody out in the audience who's looking to for a doctorate, kind of a doctoral question for research, this might be a good one.
Okay, we had a couple that you sort of already answered in another question, so I'm going to skip over a couple. Lisa is asking, how can you create a lakeside environment that will be attractive or favorable to otters? So is there something in particular that they look for?
I love that question. Well, first of all, it's really about protecting the watershed because you could have one really beautifully protected lake, but if all around it is, there's no habitat, then they're not going to stay. They don't stay at one lake. They're traveling throughout a circuit of, several square miles, lots of square miles. And a lot of times that circuit is connected by streams and rivers and brooks and even ephemeral water systems. So really it's looking more at a large landscape and protecting the whole watershed. And that's going to help the otters. And then if you are, if you do have lakeside property or waterside property, keeping kind of a buffer between your front kind of your lawn going down to it and the water's edge. That's just good for everybody. All the studies show that when we have our edges on our lakes and ponds with shade, it really increases the diversity of the life in the water, and that's going to benefit the otter. So that's good. And I'll just put a plug in here about not using, making sure that your system, your lawn system or your home system isn't flushing any extra nutrients into the ponds or lakes, because then that's just going to cause algal blooms and that's going to kill off the fish and the animals that the otters are depending on. And of course, I'll just say no pesticides because that's going to hurt them too. So
Excellent. All good things for otters and for our lakes.
exactly.
Okay, we have a few more minutes here. Deborah is asking, where do they sleep, assuming they do?
Oh yes, they do sleep. I have so much otter information in my brain that I forget pieces of it. But what they do is they travel. So they don't have one den that they go back to. So they don't have like a home base because they're traveling throughout their territory, always marking it, always going to the different spots and setting their boundaries down. They have different spots that they sleep in along the way. And a lot of times they're reusing kind of old lodges of beavers, muskrat kind of areas, old abandoned fox dens, groundhog homes. So anything that's kind of tucked under, any toppled over tree, kind of where there's root, sometimes just even right under a tree where there's some space. So nothing, they're not making like beds with, cushy blankets and cushions. It's very rough. The dens where they have their young are going to be up from the water's edge because something that they're going to be concerned about, or just something that kind of contributes to the death of their young, is if their den gets flooded or wet when the young are little, because they are not, it's hard for them to keep so warm. So as soon as they get wet, they're going to be in trouble. So the dens where they have the young, the nursery dens, are located kind of upland from the water. And female territories are going to need a variety of denning spots for them to be successful. And so I'm all about, one other way to improve your otter habitat is to keep the stuff in your forest that falls down, just let it be down, because there's lots of animals besides otters that are going to make use of that kind of under that area. So yeah, and they
Great.
do. I see Gloria say they do stay in beaver lodges. They kind of, they'll head into a beaver lodge, particularly in the winter, to catch up on a little warmth.
Okay, well, I mean, there's so many more questions and we could probably stay here all night talking about otters, but it is 8 o'clock, so we're going to end for this evening. And if we didn't get to your questions, certainly do feel free to reach out to us or to Susie. We can try to answer your questions offline as soon as we can. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in this evening. And again, thank you, Susie, for this great presentation. I learned a lot of things about otters I didn't know before, and I can't wait to see them out in the wild again and have a little more information about them. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And it was such a pleasure. And I'm a big fan of New Hampshire lakes and all of the beautiful lakes that we have here in New Hampshire. So keep up the great work. Yay. And yay
Yay.
for the otters. And yeah,
Yay.
if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at the Harris Center. So thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
You too.
Bye.